Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm King Sway, and welcome to another edition of RPG Horror Stories. Today we have DM decides to change the rules of text game. Player objects, game falls apart. This comes from Small Red Robin 14. Here we go. So, I want to start the story by managing a few expectations. This is this isn't nearly as dramatic as some of the stories on here, just as a mediocre DM, some really crappy players, myself included, and a concept that seemed half-assed at best. I also want to mention that this was one of my favorite experiences in D&D as a young and impressionable 16-year-old, so I may not remember everything about this campaign clearly. I'm not sure you have the hackles up for this, but I promise you, it only impacts my own behavior. I've changed a lot since then, and I honestly deeply regret how I acted in that game. With that out of the way, let's get started. I found a text Roll20 game with a fairly interesting concept. Basically, everybody in the party were small folk, and the whole thing was about proving to the whole how sometimes big things come in small packages, so to speak. So I apply, get accepted, and make a sweet kobold druid with somewhat edgy backstory. The other noticeable cast members are the DM, a man who claims he is in his 40s, henceforth referred to as DM, and the problem player, who we'll call Caduceus, because one of the things I remember about him is he was always working on Caduceus cosplay at the time. The other players, there were four of them, if memory serves, were honestly pretty chill people. I don't remember much about the first session, aside from the DM learning I was 16 and telling me to let him know if anything made me uncomfortable. Caduceus' character spending a lot of time in the spotlight, and my character getting beaten up by a hellhound. I think the DM and Caduceus may have gotten into a brief rule argument, but it's pretty hazy. It's the second session when things start to go south. We arrive at a cave and get caught by traps that leave us with pitfalls in a few wide areas in entrance in the cave. We start discussing how everyone can get across safely, and one of the players suggests we use planks from an old cart lying nearby. DM immediately draws a blank square over the cart and says it isn't there. Oh boy, here we go. So several part so several party members, including my character, attempt to jump and are injured. During this session, Caduceus repeatedly posts about his cosplay struggles in a group chat not too many of us were playing in. Initially posts my sympathies, but I stop replying after DM tells us to stop and focus on the game. We end the session after a fight with some goblins. The next session, we encounter a river into the cave. On the other side of the river, we see a bench that we can maybe use to cross the river by turning into a makeshift bridge. The party starts discussing how we can clear the river until my character offers to just fly across. It's now I should talk about my character in a bit more detail. My character was a subrace kobold from one of the supplemental books I mentioned earlier, and because of that, she had wings. After the whole drama, while the tiefling thing I made sure to clear my subrace with the DM, who explicitly said he was fine with it. She had issues around trusting people with knowledge of these wings, though, hence why she attempted to jump across before. But in her mind, she needed to be practical. They were in enemy territory and needed to avoid getting washed away. So she reveals she has wings to the party, and I type that I fly across. Cut to the DM getting upset that my character had wings. I apologize immediately, offer to retcon because I'm kind of spineless, despite the sudden changes needed to be made to my character's backstory, while Caduceus once again argues my case. Clearly, the DM listened to him because my character was allowed to keep her wings. although they became heavily modified and somewhat useless. So my character is able to get across the water, and we get to the bench across. I don't remember what happened for the rest of the session. I don't really remember what happened the rest of the session, but I think we were on an alchemy bench. I don't really know. What I do remember is the DM sending us a PDF about a Darkest Dungeon inspired supplement and asking us if we wanted to change to that. We all voted no. Fast forward to the next session. By this point, we've lost a couple players. We get into a fight with ogres, a fight that Caduceus pretty much dominated with his magic sword. Even with that, we'll only win by the fight by the skin of our teeth, and after that, the party becomes separated. Caduceus then encounters some kind of underwater monster that I'm pretty sure, 90% sure, was meant to kill him, as we were level 3. And at that point, I remember one of the players saying that was a monster meant for a higher level party. My apologies, I don't remember what the monster was. Even so, Caduceus is able to drive it off with his sword. Some clever tactics, and the monster's crappy land speed. After this session, the DM announces that he is removing all our magic items, despite the fact that more than half of the party has not even used them. Caduceus throws a fit, arguing his item is having tied to his character's backstory, and the DM can't just take it away. I try to calm them down and act as a mediator, but fail badly, and eventually end up leaving, so they can sort it out themselves. By the next session, the DM has allowed us to keep our magical items, but he's modified them to weaken them, even those of us who actually haven't bothered to use them at all. By this point, we've lost 2 more players, so I suggested a friend join us. Ironically, he also turned out to be pretty toxic, but that's another story. We're barely making it through the dungeon, and by this point, I'm pretty sure the DM is still trying to kill us, but I felt guilty about leaving, especially because it meant everyone else was going to wouldn't be able to play. I figure having my friend will make it up so it could be bearable. Caduceus and the DM are arguing almost constantly, and even though this game is text-based, you can almost taste the tension in the chat box. As it turned out, I shouldn't have bothered, because almost as soon as my friend joined, the DM declared the game was canceled and kicked all of us from the server. The end. Okay, lot to talk about there. First thing I'm going to say is that DM was probably wasn't in his 40s, or even if he was, maybe he was a new DM, because for him to just put something over the map and be like, oh, the card's not there, it's suddenly not there. It sounded like he was trying to railroad the guys into doing what he wanted, and then when they fought back against what he was doing, because just, oh, well, I don't want you to have these magical items anymore, I'm the DM. I was actually surprised he didn't pull I'm the DM, and what I say goes. It's my campaign. Like, I'm gonna take my ball and go, but he did pull I'm gonna take my ball and go home. So I'm glad OP. Well, I can't even say glad OP got out of there. I'm kind of glad that the session didn't end too terribly, even though with all the bad experiences. But that was kind of crazy. I mean, I don't want to say who does that, because I've heard stories and I've read stories, but yeah, he just sounded like he wasn't ready to improvise at all. I hope OP kept in touch with the other players, because my personal experiences, I'm going on almost 20 years hanging with a guy I've never met personally from AOL friends. But that's my take on it. Leave your comments down below if you would have done something different, or if you agree with how the game was handled. Please don't say that. Please, for the Lord Jesus, don't say that. But I'll see you in the next one. I'm King Sway. I'll catch you later, guys.